Okay. Can I remind everybody to turn their cameras off then?
Okay.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Cabinet via Microsoft Teams. Good to have you all with us today on this quite lovely sunny afternoon. I don't think we have any apologies today. I believe Francis Taylor is joining us a little later, so that is a full house for today. Before I go further into the agenda, I do just want to briefly reflect on the sad news we heard yesterday of one of our Senedd members or past Assembly members for South Wales East, and that's Mohammed Asghar, who sadly passed away yesterday morning, very suddenly. A great shock to everybody. Many of you will have known Oscar, as we called him, for many years. He's been a member for South Wales East for some 13 years, and a very likeable and diligent, hard-working man. And our thoughts and prayers are with his wife and his daughter at this sad time. And I would just ask you if we could just have a couple of moments reflection for Oscar and his family. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. Some further sad news as well. Our MP's father also passed away last week, Peter Davis, a long-standing councillor on Newport City Council as well. And our thoughts also go out to David, his family, and Peter, his father's wife as well, Kath. So with that, I'll move on into the next item on the agenda, and that's declarations of interest. Are there any declarations to be made aware of at this point? I'll start. I have one. I will be declaring a personal and prejudicial interest in item 4, the replacement local development plan. And the reason for that is that my farm has been put forward as a candidate site in that future LDP. So I will be withdrawing from the meeting and handing over to Deputy Leader Bob Greenland to take through that report, and I won't be joining the meeting afterward. Okay, any further declarations of interest from anyone? No, if you find something as you go through, please just declare it verbally and we will make sure electronic form gets sent through to you. Okay, so first of all, a big welcome to anybody who might look in on this meeting or who may be watching it live. Just to introduce myself, I'm Peter Fox, leader of the council, and if I could just invite quickly my cabinet colleagues to introduce themselves, and perhaps you could just switch your camera on when you do. And can I start with Bob, please?
Hi, Bob Greenland, and I have political responsibility for enterprise and land use planning.
Thank you. Richard?
Richard John, Cabinet Member for Children, Young People and Mon Life.
Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Jones, Cabinet Member for Social Justice and Community Development.
Phil?
Phil Murphy, Cabinet Member for Resources.
Jane?
Jane Pratt, Cabinet Member for Infrastructure and Neighbourhood Services.
Penny?
Hi, I'm Penny Jones and I've got responsibility in Cabinet Member for Health, Safeguarding and Social Care. Thank you.
And Paul?
Good afternoon, Paul Jordan, Cabinet Member for Governance and Law.
Thanks very much. We're also joined by Councillor Dimitri Petruni, leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Joe Watkins, the leader of the Liberal Group, and we will be joined later by Councillor Francis Taylor, leader of the Independent Group. We're also joined by several officers, and welcome to you all. And if you are invited in to speak, could you introduce yourselves at that point, please? Okay, thanks. So we'll move on then onto item 3, the first substantial report of the agenda, and that is the 2019-20 Revenue and Capital Outturn Statement. And I'll hand over to Councillor Phil Murphy to take us through this. Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And the purpose of this report is to provide members with information on the revenue and capital outturn position for 2019-20. In amongst the recommendations are that members consider the net revenue outturn deficit explained in section 3 of the report, amounting to 3.76 million, and the one-off items offsetting this deficit to provide an overall net surplus to the revenue account of some 1.8 million, and use the revenue surplus for the year to increase the council fund balance to allow the authority maximum flexibility to respond and mitigate the financial risks surrounding the COVID-19 situation. And note the extent of movements in individual budgeted draws on school balances, and I'll come to that later on in my presentation. There's also a section on the 84% delivery of budgeted mandated savings agreed by Council previously, and any implicit remedial actions or savings included to compensate for the around 16% of savings, that's some 1.03 million, reported as delayed or unachievable by service managers. And there's a section in the report further on, which I won't go into today, which gives some considerable detail about that. We're also asked to consider the capital outturn of some 24 million, with an underspend of 1.55 million, primarily due to underspending on specific grant-related schemes. Section 3.2 deals with the heart of this report. We are under very considerable pressures with regards to the delivery of services. There was an overspend of 4,840,000 during the year, despite a complete halt on non-essential spend. Very, very challenging conditions, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. And that was partially offset by some overperformance on financing and appropriations, collection of council tax, etc. So that brought us down to nearly 3.8 million overspend. But there were some one-off situations during the year. The adoption of the Ealing judgment with regards to exempt leisure services income on VAT eventually led to a refund from HMRC of some 2.3 million. And we're also allowed these days to use what's called the capitalisation directive, and that was 3,250,000, and that comes up later in sections 3.8 and 9. So we had a revised surplus of 1,796,000 after taking those two items into account. However, this position, as I was saying earlier on, should not distract from the underlying financial challenges that have to be addressed. The pressure areas remain those that have been highlighted throughout the year with regards to additional learning needs, social care generally, children's services especially, passenger transport giving us a lot of issues at the moment, waste, car parking and on-life activities. So those are the main areas that are causing us the pressures that have led to that 4.8 million overspend on the delivery of services. Further explanations are given throughout the report, and there's sections of the report specifically designed to provide information to the scrutiny committees when we can get them up and running. So these costs are listed in the report. But in particular, the 3.25 million with regards to capitalisation, that included items such as sharing back office and administrative services with other authorities, investment in service reform, feasibility work, funding the cost of service reconfiguration, driving digital approaches, sharing management teams and staffing structures, and setting up alternative delivery models to deliver services. That sort of items of expenditure can now be capitalised, and that does take some pressure off the budget. I said at the start that we were looking to allocate that 1.8 million surplus to the general fund, and that's going to enable us to deal in some way with the increasing costs and pressures in children's services, other cost pressures like I mentioned with passenger transport. There are further savings to be achieved because Welsh Government didn't allow a funding floor last time when we were doing the budget, and as a result there's 359,000 that we still have to find there. The local government pay award is still not finalised, and that could well give us some additional pressures. Clearly COVID-19 pressures are substantial, and there's still some doubt as to whether income forwarded from Welsh Government will be sufficient to cover all of that. And there was those floods, remember those floods when we had absolute deluges. It's hard to remember now, we've had it dry for so long, but there was a lot of expenditure regarding those floods which we're yet to see reimbursed. So the COVID-19 situation presents its own financial challenges and uncertainty. We have had some substantial additional costs in relation to carrying out our duties and under that pandemic rules and regulations. And some of these impacts are going to be difficult to model, will potentially only manifest themselves once a degree of normality returns to service delivery. So with regards to the changes that we're likely to see, we've created some new services, some have stopped, staff have been redeployed, supply chains have changed, social distancing operations are causing disruption, the most vulnerable members of the county are needing additional support. There's been increased focuses on the way that services are going to be provided and meetings are going to be held. And there's an awful lot of turmoil in the system at the moment, which is likely to impact on the finances. And in addition, there's that uncertainty as to how much is likely to come through as a full consequential of the funding being passed through from UK government. So given that significant risk of a situation developing where funding is not sufficient to offset the losses, we are going to be carrying out a very detailed financial sustainability assessment and draft budget recovery plan, which will evaluate financial comments and funding forecasts. And I know that Councillor Vitruni is particularly interested in the timescales for that. And the initial assessment will be presented to the Cabinet on the 29th of July meeting, and the detailed financial sustainability assessment and the budget recovery plan will come forward in September. Turning now to education, we started the year with a deficit on school balances overall of some 232,000, and that's increased during the year to 435,000, with 15 schools starting the financial year in deficit, with 17 finishing the year there. Some went into deficit, others came out. During the last couple of years, the authority has funded Teachers' Pay Award the last 2 years, and the region teachers' pension increases have been afforded by means of a Welsh Government grant. The budgets are closely monitored by the Directorate Finance teams, and they ensure that the spend remains in line with the budgets where possible. all schools reporting a deficit must have a recovery plan in place. Normally that is a 3-year recovery plan. This can be extended by agreement with the Cabinet Member for Children and Young People, Richard John, and myself. And we are closely monitoring the comprehensive schools in particular, where they're having an awful lot of pressures that they're currently dealing with. That leader is a very quick run through. It's a very, very detailed report. I congratulate the officers on the way it is set out. We have had comments in the past that it's difficult to follow. I don't think that is the case anymore. It's been made very, very readable. So with that, I'll wait for any questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Thanks for taking us through that. And I agree. It's a very easy report to use. I think the latest format is really helpful, really good. But the underlying messages that you've highlighted there, we must not lose sight of the significant overspends in services. We're fortunate we've had those one-off opportunities to bring the budget back into surplus, but it just shows how challenging the current situation is and will continue to be, especially with the uncertainties around what's happening in the current year with COVID. And it's only right then that we can replenish that general reserve with some of that money to try and make sure we have some resilience when it comes to offsetting some of those further pressures, especially if we don't get all of the money we would hope to get from Wales Government to cover some of these pressures. And you're quite right in also pointing out, Phil, that we still have issues with the past crisis of flooding, and it's not that long ago, and that was devastating, and it won't be long before we're getting toward winter again, and who knows what will come with that season. I'm going to open up to colleagues. Just for information, Councillor Petruni has forwarded some questions, and I will be asking Dimitri to put his questions. I know Phil's answered one of them probably, and then I'll invite individual cabinet members in to answer some of those. But before we do that, any colleagues like to add anything, or indeed officers, if you want, just raise your hand. Jane, would you like to come in?
Thank you very much, Leader, and I too would like to echo the sentiment. I found this report very easy to read, and I'd like to congratulate officers on the way that it was laid out. We certainly are facing huge pressures, and it is a very sobering report, and moving forward we face unprecedented challenges. I was only talking to the head of waste this morning, and the market for recyclables has collapsed across the world. So it's certainly going to be even more difficult for our officers to really balance the books in the future. And I think it's long overdue for Welsh Assembly Government to make this funding formula fairer with the challenges that we are undoubtedly facing as a council. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Absolutely echo that last point, because if we do want to find a sustainable way forward for not just this authority but other authorities similar to us, there needs to be a root and branch look at that formula. Colleagues, anybody else from Cabinet wanting to come in at this point? No? Okay. Dimitri, can I invite you to put your questions, and then I'll invite individual Cabinet members to deal with them.
Yes, thank you, Peter. I appreciate the question was answered. So for the first question, I just want to slightly ask a more detailed. Just to add from the Labour Group's perspective on Mohammed Ashgar on his sad passing. He was a character, wasn't he, Peter? And it's a sad loss to the Assembly. And actually the first, I'm saying the first BAME Assembly member, and that should be celebrated and recognised and breaking the barrier for many BAME communities, regardless of politics.
Yeah.
My questions. Thanks, Phil, for your answer. That detailed recovery plan, will it include if you look at all, I know there's so many variables, but will that detailed assessment include an integration of a second wave and the possible ramifications financially speaking, or if there is a second wave? Because if you read all the experts, they're saying probably in the autumn, end of September, early October, the normal flu season kicks back in. So I'll just that'll be my updated question on the first question. Peter, do you want me to go through all of them, or do you want to go?
Yeah, if you could, and then I can bring the cabinet members in then in line with a number of questions.
Okay, great. The second question is, I know there's some explanation, but I just kind of want a more detailed explanation of why there's a 27% year increase in demand for children's services this year. Every year it increases, and I'm just trying to understand the trend. It doesn't really tell us the trend of what's driving that, the underlying stories. I wonder if you could give me a better flavour, if possible. Yeah. Third question, the finance position of resources seems to be mainly in the positive because we haven't replaced senior staff, which is a bit worrying given the demands on officers already, particularly around resources. So I'm just wondering, have we basically had an underlying underspend because we haven't replaced senior staff? Yeah. And the fourth question, how have 3 of our 4 comprehensives seen their deficit double in the last year? Given that a few of them are already in recovery plans, that doesn't make any sense to me. So again, greater explanation on that would be brilliant.
Great. Well, thanks for the questions, Dimitri, and I'll bring colleagues in. Phil, I'll invite you to reflect a little bit more on the first question, and then I'll invite Penny Jones in to answer the second one.
Yeah, thanks, leader. And Peter Davis has just popped up in the corner of my screen here, volunteering to help with that. We are trying to cover absolutely everything in this assessment. We're trying to anticipate as much as we possibly can. What any reasonable assumptions and estimate we can make to determine the extent of the financial impact is going to be made. This is very much work in progress at the moment. And I know that Peter will want to add a bit more to that. If I can just go to question 3 while I'm here, and then
okay.
Yeah. Yes, there was a positive outturn position with regards to the position for resources aided by savings resulting from staff vacancies or seconded staff. One aspect related to senior staff vacancies in finance, another senior staff vacancy as a result of the secondment at the head of business transformation to the Cardiff Capital Region City deal. In the Chief Officer commentary, it does confirm that senior vacancies in finance is not sustainable and the recruitment process is going to recommence shortly. Savings from staff vacancies and savings account for 286,000 of the 413 underspend. Senior staff vacancy savings in finance were 146,000. So yes, yeah, we did save some money by those means, but it clearly isn't sustainable. And as I said just now, we are going to go through the recruitment process as soon as we can. But there's been a little bit on just at the moment, as you can imagine. I don't know whether Peter wants to add to that. I don't know if you want to invite him in there before the others come in.
Yes, if you would, Peter, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you, leader, and thank you for the question. So just to sort of, I guess, supplement what Phil has touched on, you know, I guess it echoes Councillor Pratt's earlier comments in terms of the unprecedented challenges that we're facing. I guess it's a combination of that, and as Councillor Murphy touched on, the fluidity of the situation, the levels of uncertainty that we have in terms of what the future holds, and back to Dimitri, Councillor Petroni's question around the second wave. So what we will look to do in bringing the report together for the 29th of July is to present an assessment of the in-year position, a set of forecasts that is based on a set of base case assumptions. We will look to make it clear to Cabinet what those assumptions are. We will also look to draw out those assumptions that we feel carry some levels of significant sensitivity, i.e. the ones that if they shift will look to move the numbers significantly. And equally, there are things at the moment that we are unable to precisely determine. An example of that is our council tax collection rate. We're obviously working with council taxpayers at the moment in terms of arranging payment plans, etc. In terms of, you know, how the collection rate may be impacted through the year, that's almost an impossible one to call at the moment. So together with the forecast, and as I've suggested, we will be drawing out those assumptions, those sensitivities, but also some of the key risks. And as we move into September with the recovery plan, I guess in some ways, as is always the case with a recovery plan, and as you move through a financial year, it will need to be iterative. I'd have a fair crack at the fact that it's going to be even more so for us. So, you know, I am anticipating us having budget monitoring periods running through from month 5, 7, 9, possibly even month 11 into outturn, to make sure that on a very timely basis we're keeping on top of, you know, what are going to be changing circumstances and then continuing to adjust our position. So hopefully that gives confidence, not just to you, Leader, but to Councillor Petroni with his question.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Peter. Can I invite Penny Jones in to reflect on the second question around demand for children's services?
You, Chair. Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Petroni. Yeah, a difficult one. 2019 and 20 has seen a continued upward trend of increase in numbers, rising from 173 at the end of 2018 and 19 to 219 at the end of 2019-20, and that's quite some rise. There have been 76 looked after children entrants over the course of the year, offset by 30 children or young people ceasing to be looked after. So of the 76 entrants this year, this comprised 39 family groups, including 2 sibling groups of 5 children and 2 sibling groups of 6 children, i.e. 22 children over 4 families. There is no one single determining factor or trend for the increase that is known for the increase, and that is why the Welsh Government visited every local authority to try and assess an underlying trend. It can be attributable, but not a single cause, to underlying social, psychological, structural vulnerabilities within parenting and across family network, and identification of risk and vulnerability through social work and partner agencies, which can be seen as a positive, I suppose. And really, I can't, there's very, as I say, we still don't know the impact of COVID-19 at this stage. So it is something that'll probably get worse rather than better. But having said that, it's something that we have to manage. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Penny. And could I invite Councillor Richard John in to talk to the last question on schools, please?
Thank you. So this was Councillor Petroni's question about the rise in deficits at 3 of our 4 secondary schools. These were Caldecott, Chepstow and King Henry VIII. And the deficits did rise in these 3 schools as anticipated. Both Caldecott and Chepstow have got recovery plans in place, which have been agreed by Councillor Murphy and by me. Both schools have improved on their recovery plan balances. In the case of Chepstow, this was an improvement of around £100,000. Now, we put these plans in place with officers to allow schools time to recover, while also being able to maintain standards in those schools. King Henry VIII in Abergavenny has faced significant pressures around staffing, and we've discussed this. Councillor Murphy and myself have discussed this with them. When the budget was agreed with the school, it was agreed on pupil numbers at the time. You'll recall that school census data in Wales is taken in the January, and those pupil numbers are then used to fund the school for the following financial year. So that presents a challenge for a successful growing school like King Henry VIII that is attracting more pupils because they will always be funded on, based on the Welsh Government's funding model, they will always be funded on a previous year's pupil numbers. So that has presented some significant challenges. And as the school has grown, there's been a need to increase staffing levels to support those pupils. The school has also taken in additional pupils in mid-year, obviously for whom they were not funded. They've taken in a number of pupils this year from Gwynflew. Obviously, we know that the Welsh Medium School, which is the catchment Welsh Medium School for the north of the county, went into a red category, and this resulted in some parents opting to move their children to King Henry VIII, and obviously that there was a need for some first language Welsh provision at King Henry. So you get issues like that mid-year, which obviously haven't been budgeted for. But we must remember that the number one priority for our schools is not balancing the books. The number one priority is teaching and learning. And King Henry VIII has achieved some of the best GCSE results in the country last year. I visited the school on results day with the Minister, Kirsty Williams, and there were pupils achieving really outstanding results. So the forecast throughout the year has reflected those issues, and the school continues to work closely with the authority to improve their financial position. So overall, as Councillor Murphy said, 2 additional schools went into a deficit position, and all schools which are in a deficit are working with the local authority to improve their financial position. But I really must emphasise that teaching and learning is the priority, and that's why we've been discussing a loan facility with Monmouth Comprehensive School. While the school does have a significant deficit, we don't want to prevent head teachers from making investments that they believe to be necessary to raise standards. Particularly when it comes to Monmouth, they're looking to make additional investments in literacy and numeracy. Teaching and learning is the overall priority, and I really think we would be doing young people a disservice if we were to put money ahead of school standards.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, and thanks for taking the time to talk through that one. Thank you, Dimitri, again for the questions. Thank you, colleagues, for the way you answered them. Okay, so if there's no further indications to speak, I'll just check my chat bar. I will, right, and obviously, as Phil said, once select committees are back up and running, they will no doubt be considering the elements of these reports pertinent to their areas, and we look forward to them being able to do that. So I'm going to then just talk us through the recommendations. I know there's quite a lot, but I think in fairness to those looking in, they need to know what the recommendations are. And then we have the vote box up in your chat bar, so we hopefully that will work. But anyway, the recommendations before us today are in 2.1 that members consider the net revenue outturn deficit explained in section 3 of the report of 3.76 million. And the one-off items offsetting this deficit to provide an overall net surplus to the revenue account of 1.8 million. 2.2, that members endorse the use of the revenue surplus for the year of 1.8 million to increase the council fund balance to allow the authority maximum flexibility to respond to and mitigate the financial risks surrounding the ongoing COVID-19 situation. 2.3, that members note the extent of movements in individual budgeted draws on school balances as shown in section 8 of the report, and the further review to be undertaken as part of month 5 budget monitoring report. 2.4, that members note the 84% delivery of the budgeted mandated savings agreed by full council previously, and the implicit remedial action savings included in the financial monitoring to compensate for circa 16%, that equates to 1.03 million, reported as delayed or unachievable by service managers. And finally, that members consider the capital outturn spending of £24 million, introducing an underspend of 1.55 million, primarily due to underspending of specific grant-related schemes, and accepts slippage requests for 24.8 million being endorsed, and they're listed in Appendix 2, along with the related presumptions made around financing consequences as per identified in Section 6. So if you're content with those recommendations, I'd ask you to vote now. You can see for, against, or abstain. And that's we've got 9 votes somehow there, but there should only be 8 votes. Okay, so we'll I'm not sure how that'll work out, but that looks like it's unanimous. So thank you very much, everybody. Now, at this point, I'm going to have to hand over to Bob Greenland, Deputy Leader, to take us through, or rather take you through, the next report on the agenda, and that is the LDP. And so at that point then, I will say goodbye and leave you to the rest of the meeting and hand over to you, Bob.
Thank you, Leader, and good afternoon, members. Right, the report in front of us now is the replacement local development plan update in the light of COVID-19. Now, it may seem like a long time ago, but it was only in March of this year that Council agreed to go out to consultation on what we had agreed was our preferred strategy for the replacement local development plan. And what we said at that point was that we would have a 6-week consultation process with all interested parties, the public and various other groups as well, before coming back. But of course, we know what happened after that. And so before lockdown, there was, I think, only room for 2 meetings to take place. One was held with Monmouth, and one was held in Raglan. So that is as far as we got with our consultation before lockdown came upon us. Now, officers have not withdrawn the consultation process at the moment. The consultation process remains open. And indeed, so does the call for second candidate sites, or for candidate sites. And this will be the final call for candidate sites. But the decision has been made that in both those cases, we will remain open for consultation. But quite clearly, there are some people who will not be able to respond unless we have some continued meetings which are face-to-face, drop-in sessions. So at the moment, we're not even able to say when the consultation process will end. But it will not end until all people who wish to make comments have had the opportunity to do so and can actually come forward and meet face-to-face if they want to, social distancing accepted, whatever might be in place then. But also, I think what we have learned from this last period of time is that an awful lot of people actually prefer to respond on the internet using things like Microsoft Teams or Zoom or one of those other platforms. So I'm sure that as we move forward, those might become a part of our consultation exercise as well. Now, we are awaiting some further guidance from the Welsh Government about their COVID response and under the LDP process, but we haven't had that as yet. So what we're asking this afternoon is that you consider the issues and the objectives that we set out in the very first place as being relevant for our LDP. I think we call them the vision and objectives. And officers have looked at them again. Their view is that, in fact, they're more relevant now than they were when we set them. And if you look on your report, I think it's 3.6 on your report, you will see set out the various issues and objectives and the officers' views on those in light of COVID-19. And so we believe that the strategy is still good to go forward with, and therefore we are asking Cabinet to endorse that as the preferred strategy still. When we have the opportunity to know the Welsh Government's guidelines, we will go back to Council with a changed time frame, because quite clearly what we now face is the inability to complete the LDP process by the time of the what is called the drop dead date for our existing plan, and that is the 31st of December next year. So we really were aiming to have a new LDP in place by the 1st of January 2022. Because of the various stages we have to go through, not least the consultation processes, that is now not going to be possible. So there will be a period of time when we don't have a current plan in place between the 1st of January 2022 and eventually whenever it is that we will get our new plan adopted. So that presents us with a number of problems. First of all, if we don't have a plan in place, decisions will have to be made on applications that come forward based only on national planning policy. So all the site allocations that we've got in the existing LDP and the local designations, the settlement boundaries, everything falls away once we get to the 1st of January 2022. That is an extremely dangerous position, frankly, for us to be in by the time we get there. So what we are doing is asking Welsh Government if they will look again at the final date that this plan that we've got in existence at the moment finishes, and extends it so that we're not left in this void position for any length of or too long, if any time at all. And that is the other recommendation that comes with this report. I think I'll probably leave it at that, but we've got Craig O'Connor, who is our head of planning, with us as well, and also Rachel Lewis, who is our policy plans manager, with us as well. So would either of you want to come in at the moment and add anything to what I've said before I open it up for discussion amongst Cabinet members? Either of you? I'm assuming that is no, unless I can see anything else. No, okay. Well, in that case, I'll open it up for discussion to Cabinet members. I know I've also got a question from Joe, but in fact, it might be, Joe, that I've answered in my introduction the question you've asked, but I'll certainly give you the opportunity of asking it nevertheless. So first of all, Cabinet members, is there anything you would wish to add at this time? I'm not getting any anybody coming forward at all. So can I perhaps ask Joe? Joe, would you like to come in now?
Thank you very much. And yes, Bob, you did actually cover quite a lot of that, but just to make sure that residents know that their voices are being heard. So I'd like to ask that the council actually really reaffirms that its commitment to fully engaging with residents with the consultation process after COVID restrictions are no longer in place. I met with and corresponded with quite a lot of Sevenside residents who were really concerned still, and they really felt that their voices needed to be heard, and they were planning on coming to the public events. Very obviously they had to be cancelled, but could you please just reaffirm that you really will make sure that there is an opportunity for those voices to be spoken and also to be listened to? Thank you.
Yeah, I can certainly confirm that. The consultation with all our stakeholders is a vital part of this process of bringing forward the next LDP, because we want to get the views of everybody before we as a council, and it will be as a council, makes the decision on the adoption of our next local development plan. But we have to have this consultation process, and it's all very well to say that we are going to do a lot of consultation online, but we are conscious that an awful lot of residents will not be able to join in that consultation. So yes, we will make sure that everybody has the opportunities that they need to be part of the process moving forward. Yeah. Okay, there was only one question for this report, and so unless I see any indication that anybody else wishes to say anything on that, then I think I will just read out the recommendations before we go to the vote. And the recommendations are this: that Cabinet endorses the RLDP issues, visions and objectives, and the strategic direction of the RLDP in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic, that it remains relevant and appropriate, and approves that work on the RLDP should continue. And second, that Cabinet writes to the Minister for Housing and Local Government to amend the Planning Wales Act 2015 to remove the drop-dead date legislative provisions to prevent a policy vacuum and allow for decisions to be taken in accordance with the existing LDP until the adoption of the RLDP, unless newer national policy or evidence indicates otherwise. So that is the sorry, I think my camera went off for a moment. That is the recommendations that have been for you. We'll vote on it together. So we're taking the two recommendations together, and I think you will find the new voting slip on the chat bar. So could I ask you now to vote on the recommendations? Oh, yes, I was a bit concerned. Of course, there are only 7 of us in now, so we have 7 votes, and they are all in favour. So thank you, members, for that. Thank you also all officers who have been in attendance this afternoon, and for other members who have been here from the opposition parties. And with that, and no other people indicating that I think they wish to speak, I think we'll close the meeting. Thank you all for your attendance. Good afternoon. Bye.